something that was raised to me with me over the weekend by somebody in family as well, because they said, "Oh, you've been to China a few times," and but I thought China was friends with Iran and friends with Cuba and friends with Venezuela. Why haven't they done anything? You know, and that's what we get. And I think it's worth just dealing with that sort of straight up, really. I mean, how can we answer that?
Yeah, well, as the joke goes, how do you get to Warsaw? Well, I wouldn't start from here. Um, like, this is a really important, and actually it's a really difficult and a really complicated question, and we shouldn't treat it lightly. And we're not, in the course of a few minutes, we're not going to get to a sort of comprehensive answer, but hopefully we can touch on a few useful ideas. Firstly, I think it is important to recognise that this war, brutal criminal war, waged with no, not even the slightest nod to the United Nations, not even the slightest nod to international law. It's a fascistic type of war, fascistic type of behaviour by the US and by Israel. It's a war in Iran, and Iran is being punished because it is a sovereign state, because it defends its sovereignty, because it doesn't follow the Washington Consensus, because it doesn't follow neoliberalism, because it insists on maintaining control of its natural resources, most of which are nationalized, by the way, because it is the world's biggest state supporter of Palestine, because it's a proud and dignified nation that, generally speaking, does not go along with US diktat, and the West can't handle that, right? So it is a war in Iran, but it's also a war on Palestine, because the Iranian support has been absolutely indispensable to the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian national movement in general ever since 1979. The Iran under the Shah dictatorship up until 1979 was an ally of Israel. Gave no support whatsoever to Palestine. From 1979 onwards, that changed immediately, and that's been the case for the last 47 years, that Iran became a major, absolutely critical, indispensable supporter of Palestine. So this war in Iran is also a war on Palestine. And if you oppose the war on the Palestinian people, if you oppose the genocide in Gaza, you should also defend Iran, by the way. It's a war on the axis of resistance in the region and globally. It's a war on Yemen. It's a war on Iraq. It's a war on Hezbollah in Lebanon. As I say, it's a war on Palestine. And it's a war on this whole multilateral, multipolar trajectory that we've been talking about, which makes it a war on China, which makes it a war on Russia, which makes it a war on Africa, on the Belt and Road, on BRICS, on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Iran and China have extremely deep, extremely extensive economic relations. Iran's a very important source of oil and gas to China. They've got wide-ranging cooperation on, other than energy, infrastructure, transport, technology, military. So, the US is looking, and this is very, very similar to Venezuela and very similar to the notion of colonizing or recolonizing Greenland. A lot of this is about seizing control of energy flows. The US kind of according itself the power to just impose energy blockades on China or Russia, in the event of a hot war, developing these strategic choke points. So, the war in Iran really fits into this category of like the Empire Strikes Back that we were talking about a few minutes ago. It's a part of a desperate attempt to disrupt this trajectory towards a more equal and democratic world order and to disrupt China's rise. And it does, highlight some of these deep problems, some of these deep contradictions of the current moment we're living in, where the US is declining, but it's still the military superpower that can, in a sense, do what it wants at a military level. It's not like China and Russia can just stop in. It's not like they've got a magic wand whereby they can just project their power globally.
Exactly.
China is supporting Iran to the best of its abilities, I would say. It's supporting it diplomatically. Immediate condemnation of the military strikes, immediate condemnation of the extrajudicial murder of Ali Khamenei, demands that Iran's sovereignty, that its territorial integrity be respected. Its ambassador to the United Nations, Fu Song, said clearly, unambiguously, this is a violation of international law. And, okay, diplomacy is diplomacy, words are words, but it's a lot better than what we got from other countries, right? It's a lot better than what we got from Keir Starmer or Merz or Macron.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who've issued no condemnation of the US. They've issued no condemnation of Israel. In fact, they're basically, Merz in particular has said, well, this is good. We should be doing this. Great idea, Israel. Great idea, United States. And instead, they condemn Iran for defending itself. Beyond diplomacy, obviously, China and Iran have a very vast trade relationship and investment relationship. China's been a major contributor to Iran's economic strength over the last 20 years. And it's provided that economic support in the face of brutal, wide-ranging sanctions. There's military relationship. China supplies missiles, it supplies air defense systems, it supplies training and more. And reports are coming out that the Russians are providing intelligence to Iran at the moment about the location of enemy troops and enemy missiles, enemy bases. But China does not have a global infrastructure of power projection. China's defensive posture is, that's a clear limiting factor here. China's military is set up to defend China's shores and to protect its interests in the region. It's not set up to send dozens of warplanes or aircraft carriers over to the Persian Gulf, where the Americans would attack it immediately, right? Like, there's nothing useful in a direct military sense that China can do. The other thing is, not being funny, Iran's a sovereign country.
Yeah, exactly.
Iran doesn't actually need other countries to come to its aid militarily. Iran doesn't want to be a colony of Israel. It doesn't want to be a colony of the United States, but it also doesn't want to feel that it's a province of Russia or a province of China. Iran has known that this war is coming. Iran has been preparing for this war for years, if not decades. And Iran, I think, is doing a pretty great job of defending itself, and we should thank the Iranians, thank the Iranian people, and thank the Iranian military on behalf of all of, decent humanity that they're doing that they're giving the Israelis a bloody nose, that they're giving the Americans a bloody nose. The people of Tel Aviv are finding out what Iran can do right now. The people of Haifa, of Eilat, are finding out what Iran can do. Anyone near a military base in Qatar, in the UAE, in Bahrain, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, etc., they're finding out, So Iran is a fiercely independent country, and it's able to fight its own battles. It's a very, very difficult, very, very precarious situation. But, I think, in a sense, to expect that China or Russia will come in and save the situation and then criticize them for not doing things that are manifestly not within their control is just a cop-out. We've got a job. We live in the countries that are launching this attack. We're in Britain, we're in the US, we're in Europe, etc., etc. We need to be coming out onto the streets. We need to be doing everything we can to prevent our governments from supporting this criminal aggression. Britain's just sent its HMS Dragon, or whatever it's called, from Portsmouth to Cyprus, where it's going to protect a British base in Cyprus from which US airplanes are launching their attacks on Iran. Why are we out in the streets in our millions making sure that doesn't happen? Those bases need to be closed down.
Absolutely. And bases that increasingly the people of Cyprus don't want anywhere near them as well. Very definition, I suppose, of interfering in other people's countries and imposing yourselves on them.